Tim Ayliffe here, the author of The Enemy Within. I think you'll all start joining soon, but while we're waiting for you, I might just begin by telling you a little bit about myself. The Enemy Within is my third book in the John Bailey thriller series. The first two. The first one was The Greater Good. The second one, State of Fear, and this one, my third one, has been out now for a couple of weeks. Had the joy, unfortunately, of a lockdown release, but it's been fantastic hearing from readers around through social media, etc., as you do with how they've been going and enjoying the book so far. So while we're just waiting for people to start, g'day Christy, just seen someone pop up there. Where are you coming from, Christy? While I'm just waiting for more of you to join, and please feel free to start posting questions, and I'll get to as many as I can throughout the session. It's really great to get this opportunity with you. It's such a great community, the Better Reading community. It's really exciting for me to be able to talk to you. Hi Sharon, I can see you pop up as well. I've been a journalist for about a bit more than 20 years, 23 years. Esther and Frank, g'day. I've drawn a lot of my experiences as a journalist and life experience, I guess, in the books that I write, because these books, there's a lot of truth in them, and that's been something that I've really sort of tried to do as my thing, I guess, with the crime thrillers that tell us a little bit about the world that we're living in right now. G'day Lynn, and Jane's popped up there as well. Please start sending me through some questions, and as I say, I'll get to as many as I can as we go along. Just working out how to use this here. I've had to recharge my batteries with a small espresso there. My brother and sister-in-law gave me that. It's quite appropriate. I think it's called Book Lovers, the little cup. The Enemy Within. Hey, Carolyn, I'll get to that now. She just asked, really interested to hear about your book. So, The Enemy Within is the third book in the John Bailey thriller series. This one, I think, I probably got a lot closer to the truth. It's obviously a work of fiction, but with my books, I always try to either everything within my books either has happened, will happen, or could happen. And with The Enemy Within, there's two main plot lines to this. John Bailey, it begins with him going along to a speech in Sydney. It's all set in Sydney, with Sydney being a bit of a character of the book too. He goes along to this speech of a far-right nationalist guy who's in the country. He's got a lot of sort of underground support, if you like, and Bailey goes along. He wants to do a bit of a profile of him. And in the crowd is a bunch of white supremacists that he'd heard about and not really known much about. And that really sets the ball rolling from there. There's a series of racist attacks on Sydney streets, and Bailey, sets out to be investigating this dark world that he's really interested in, white supremacists. The second plot line on the story is about, I guess, power and abuse of power. As some of you may know, I'm a journalist, have been for about 20 years. I work at the ABC, and in June 2019, the ABC was raided by the Australian Federal Police. They were searching for the source of a story that some great journalists, Dan Oakes and Sam Clark, had been working on and published actually a couple of years earlier. And they had this incredibly powerful search warrant that allowed them to add, copy, delete, or alter the ABC's files in the course of that investigation and search for the source of the story. And that really got me thinking, what if that power fell into the wrong hands? And I'm not for a second saying that the AFP is got any bad eggs that would do something like that, but the fact that power existed really disturbed me and disturbed a lot of journalists, and I'm really happy to talk more about that as we get along. So they're the two main plot lines for the book. And I'll just have a get to some of your questions. Here, got Kylie. What made you adventure from journalism into writing books? Kylie, I have always wanted to write books. As a kid, I was always writing something, and I'd wrote a book in my early 20s. I knew as a kid that I wanted to be a journalist and I wanted to be a novelist. And I felt that those two worlds could walk hand in hand, as many great, writers over time, from Hemingway to Graham Greene and Michael Robotham and, in more modern days have done. So, and Chris Hammer, of course. I knew that that was a path. So I really wanted to have a go. And it took me a while, as it does, as many authors would say, you got to, a few books in a drawer before you finally get to the one that gets published. For me, that was 1.5 books. I started writing in my late teens, early 20s, and was really playing around with a book idea and learning of what type of writer I could be. And actually, a good friend of the family once said to me, look, you write thriller actions, those sequences quite well. And that was in a book that it was probably a bit more literary, and that stayed with me. And then when I had another go at it in my early 30s, I had a false start with playing with an idea, and then I settled on the John Bailey character, and that's how I sort of decided that would be the type of books that I would write. So, yeah. Lynn has said, do you do a lot of research for your books? Well, I'm lucky, Lynn. My day job is like research. I'm really lucky. In fact, one of the ideas, my idea for the first John Bailey book, The Greater Good, just to give you an example, I was in America. I was lucky enough to be there on a US State Department scholarship, and I was having a meeting in the State Department, and it's all very sort of Chatham House rules, and so I'm not really allowed to talk about the things that I spoke about. But the one thing I can tell you is that after this fascinating conversation I had with this really clever guy in the US State Department, he asked me a question, and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I felt, well, I don't know why you want to ask me questions. I don't have the brain the size of yours, but I'll give it a go. And so he said, "Did I ever see a day when Australia would turn its back on the US in favour of a closer relationship with China?" And this is in 2012 in Obama's re-election campaign. It was actually about 6 weeks before the election, and that just got me thinking. How would that happen? Would that be approaches? Would that be moles in the government? I don't know. And that got me thinking. And then, that's where The Greater Good was spawned. So yeah, my day job's research. I'm really lucky. A lot of the great investigations that have been done at the ABC and by other media, really. I mean, as a journalist, you're a big reader of everyone else's stuff, and you have a real, I guess, interest in the world around you. In a way that makes you pick up stones and look under them a bit more than others. So for me, I'm really lucky. Day job's research, and I do get to have conversations with a lot of people that other people don't get to in my job. So a lot of the conversations I had, for The Enemy Within, for instance, and my previous books as well, whether they're in law enforcement, people that are, sharing things with me off the record that may inspire me to make sure that what I'm writing is actually really factually accurate. So even though it's a fictitious story, I want the reader to feel like this is a real world story. I'll jump to another question. Anne has said, "How long did it take you to write your book?" It's different. With each book, I think I'm growing and learning as a writer, which I actually really like that. I want to get better with every single book I do. The first book took me 3.5 years. The second one, about 2. The third book, I sort of wrestled with a manuscript for a while that I didn't really feel was working as well. But when I really got down to writing this one from start to finish, I actually wrote it in about 8 months. It was a pretty quick process, and I got a full-time job, at the ABC, and I didn't take any time off for this. I was writing on weekends, and that's when I tend to write. I get up at 5 on Saturday and Sunday, and I write for anywhere between 3 and 5 hours. And then through the week, if I do anything, it will just be reading over some of the stuff that I've done. But I tend to really focus on my day job during the week. It's I was going to say that at the start, but I'm the managing editor of TV news for the ABC. So I oversee ABC TV News Channel and our sort of video news strategy. So it's a busy job. I've got an amazing team that support me. So I've got great support there. but I'm able to write on weekends, and that's something that my family and I have been sort of working through. I have great support here at home to do that too. A message from Sarah. I've bought the book, love the series and the characters, love the Sydney feeling that runs through it. Thanks so much, Sarah. That was really important for me to make Sydney a character in the story, because it's a great city, but it's a fascinating city too. It really is a place where there are great contradictions as well. It's, on the one hand, it's this amazing, beautiful, harbour city where opportunity, abounds, if you like. There's incredible wealth, but then you've got other areas where there is not a lot of wealth, where there's a real divide between people, and I think made it a good setting for The Enemy Within, with that racial tension as well. I think Australia has had an issue with racism. We don't need to go that far back to Cronulla riots to be able to see that. And with the far right nationalist sort of movement we've been seeing rise across the world, there is more than half a dozen countries that are run by far right nationalist leaders at the moment. The white supremacists are an extension of that. And I'm not saying that they are necessarily part of that, but you'll find them in that far right nationalism sort of movement as well. Just having a look at some other questions here. So, Anne's just asking, she's asking Sarah a question about what the series is called. I might move on to that one, unless it's about my series, which is just the John Bailey thriller series. So they've each, that's really what we've done. And honestly, I've written 3. I'm writing the 4th at the moment. I feel that I'll write 20 of these John Bailey thrillers. I really love the character. So just having a scroll through here, find some more questions. Where do you get the ideas? This is from Matthew. Where do you get the ideas for your books and characters? So I've touched on that a little bit already, but in terms of the characters, I do draw from real people, people that I know, that I've that have been in my life for a while, people that I work with. There is no one in the book that is an absolute real character. I mean, I don't think that's fair on them. But I think, like any writer, I just draw from my experiences in life to base my characters on them. And look, probably some of the more controversial characters in this book. There are those that have already, made comparisons with, my far right nationalist character in this book. I mean, yes, there is comparisons with some of those figures around the world, and I'll probably avoid naming them. I construct these characters and these plot lines from real life, but without absolutely, nailing them to the real people. Here's one from Esther. 60 Minutes Nazi story could have been lifted straight from your book. Look, with this book, and that was a great investigations by Joel Tozer and Nick McKenzie for 60 Minutes and 9 newspapers. Look, they I think it's really shown that I've gotten pretty close to the truth with this book. As I was writing this book, and I'd been researching far right nationalism for a couple of years. And in February last year, the head of ASIO, Mike Burgess, gave a speech where he called out the threat of white supremacist neo-Nazi movement in Australia as one of the biggest new threats, and they were diverting a lot of resources to deal with this stuff. So that absolutely, I'm not surprised at all by the 60 Minutes story, and in fact, I'm expecting more about these sorts of groups. And look, like, social media is another big aspect of this book for me, and I mentioned that in light of the neo-Nazi story that we've been seeing in 9 newspapers and 60 Minutes, in that these people have a meeting place, and it's online, and that's one of the big differences over the last 20 years that has brought these groups closer together and made them international. And there are international links I write about in The Enemy Within. They, through the dark web and through other, social media channels, they're communicating. Often they are the minority, though, and I want to just call that out, because it's not that I'm trying to instill fear in people with this story. But what it shows is that there is a real, minority but radical underbelly in the world right now, and we've seen those far-right nationalist leaders stoke that. But these people, the way they communicate, they don't feel alone anymore, because some of them may have these radical, tendencies all through social media, and algorithms of how more content or radical content that they're viewing gets matched and put in front of them through their feeds. That has been a big problem. The social media companies particularly are starting to crack down on that, which is good and overdue, but it's still not necessarily stopping it from happening. And so you imagine someone sitting in a little dark room in the western suburbs, southern suburbs of Sydney, communicating with someone, in the United States, who's then communicating with someone somewhere in Europe. They don't feel like loners anymore. They feel like they're part of something bigger, and it spurs them on and gives them confidence. And that's a real concern. But it's the authorities are starting to crack down on that. Just going to some other questions here now, and please send them through. I'll try to get to as many as I can. Have you had a drink in every bar John Bailey visits from Esther? No, but look, it's important to do some research. That one's from Frank, actually. It's important to do that research, Frank. So I do, get around as much as I can, but I don't drink as much as Bailey. And of course, Bailey's had his battles with the booze. I mean, his backstory is that he's got a lot of post-traumatic stress after his time as a war correspondent, and he's off the booze and he's battling it in this book and the last book as well. I think in The Greater Good we saw him trying to live with that as an addiction that really helped him he was using it to help him unload that stress. And through some of the relationships, particularly the relationship with his daughter Miranda, who's got a role in all the books, in previous books, some of his relationships with the women in his life, he's really has helped him to sort of confront that and realize that if he wants to live, the booze can't live with him. So he's still battling that in this book, but he's on top of it and doing pretty well. So Lisa is just said, I missed the start. Can you read the book as a standalone? Yeah, you can, Lisa. All of my books are written as standalones. There's enough recapping in there to let you know about some of the backstory plot lines. And I think I've been a huge fan of Michael Connolly's books over the years. His Harry Bosch character. I've learned from some of these writers, which has been great for me. There's so much to read, and you as the reading community know that better than anyone. But that's the sort of background sort of stuff I put in there to be able to let people know where he's come from. So John Bailey from Jane, I love the Sydney setting, and this would be a great film or series. John Bailey is such an interesting character. Who would you like to see playing him? An Australian. I would love to play him. I do feel strongly I'm writing an Australian series. I really wanted to set global thrillers in Sydney, in Australia. I think that there's no reason why we can't do that. And there's so many great books being written in Australia right now by Australian authors, which is fantastic. But I really wanted to make Sydney a character in this one. So Bailey, who would play him? Look, Russell Crowe, if I'm going to aim incredibly high. I've always thought he's similar age. Russell disappears into his characters, and I could see him playing this role very well. Other great actors that I think good sort of character actors like Richard Roxburgh and other, others. Won't go through a hit list of all the Australian actors I admire, but look, those two are pretty high on the list. Sarah said, I've thought about this too, and is Brian Brown too handsome and skinny? Possibly. But what a great actor. So if Brian wants to talk about my books, I'm more than happy to talk to him about it. Please, keep the questions coming. And as I say, I'll get to them as many as I can. I thought that I'd also share some of the things I've been reading this year as well. I mean, this is after all a reading community. And as I said, I've been really enjoying a lot of Australian books this year. So just finished Lorraine Peck's The Second Son. I thought that was a great debut, and she's up for a Ned Kelly for in the debut debut section tonight, which is exciting for her. Those awards are going to be announced soon, actually. I'm Candace Fox's The Chase. I loved. I actually went back and read The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I'm sure many of you have read that book, but I've got a son who's a similar age to the boy in the book, and that really stayed with me. That book, and it was I couldn't put it down. It's really disturbing and a great book, but something that also gave you an amazing sense of place. Obviously an apocalyptic time, but a great sense of place. The Frenchman by Jack Beaumont. That was a great thriller book. And I'm reading now, not surprisingly, Michael Rowbotham's When You Are Mine. He's the master, and really, really enjoy his books, and looking forward, of course, to Chris Hammer's next one as well. So, yeah, keep the questions coming. I'm just having a look through to see what I might have missed. So, yeah, as I said, I'm keeping the character going. The new book I'm writing about at the moment, so touching on a bit more of a spy thriller, but I'm enjoying keeping Bailey's character going at the same time. So where's book 4 set? That's going to be a Sydney book as well. That will, might venture into Canberra as well. I'm just getting underway with it. And my favourite author, Matthew's popped up a question. My favourite author, well, Michael Connolly's definitely up there. Which he's been a big inspiration of mine for quite a while. And also, Michael Rowbotham. And I can see Mia Beattie said she's reading the Good Girl series by Michael Rowbotham now, Cyrus Haven, his new character, which is great. So have I done a bit of research into PTSD? Jane's popped another question in. I have. And also, just I guess with my experience with some of the people I've worked with, and I've seen the impact of war, covering conflicts and war for many of those people, and it really does take its toll. I think the character John Bailey, I've tried to obviously tell that PTSD story through him. But one of the things about journalists, and why I think a journalist is a great sort of detective, if you like, for these sorts of stories, trying to solve the crimes. They like a really good detective, are dogged in their pursuit of the truth, and that's John Bailey, and that's been some of these people that I've worked with. And look, I've seen it where people are so obsessed with their job that they really do sacrifice other things in their lives. So that's something that Bailey's done. He's learnt the hard way, but really from the greater good, we've seen him dealing with that, and then in the next books where he's trying to put that behind him, and he's really back into the swing of being an investigative journalist, where there's the darkness occasionally sort of pops up. And I find, look, with my books, I'm really interested in shining lights into dark places, which I think you've probably gathered from some of the stories I've told you so far. I think with fiction, you can really get close to the truth on some of these really serious issues, because with fiction, you don't have to abide by all those sorts of rules around nonfiction that you do with journalism, which are really important, mind you. But with a thriller book or with fiction, you get to create that world. You get to explore that issue with those characters, and that's something I really enjoy doing. And that's why I say I think that helps me get close to the truth. Louise has joined and says, "G'day. What part of the day or night inspires you to write?" Well, look, my writing routine is really early mornings. To be honest, I love being up when the house is quiet. When everyone else is asleep, my brain works really well, fresh in the morning. I've tried different things and learned different things over the years, staying up really late. But whenever I do stay up really late, my brain doesn't stop working, unfortunately. So after I may sit there for hours and be writing, and then I'll get into bed and lie there thinking about the book until 3 a.m, and then get up again at 6 for work. So I now I really my routine is really early mornings, but I love that. Keeps me off the booze, and going to bed early, which is probably good for my life. Another question come through here about with the research of the book, did you speak directly to any extremist groups here in Australia? No, not directly. But as I mentioned earlier, I think this is from Peter Armstrong, I should have said. Thanks, Peter. I through some of the great investigative work that Background Briefing has done, that a lot of other journalists at the ABC, and as you've seen, the 60 Minutes stuff, I've drawn on a lot of that, those investigations, and also my own, I guess, research. Unfortunately, that means going through reading, manifestos from, some of these extremists that have been responsible for some pretty, horrific acts of violence over the years, from El Paso to Christchurch to Oslo, and where they're inspired from. There's some, fairly horrendous white nationalist literature out there, and people that have inspired, the tattoos. And you'll see in my book, I talk about the kind of ink that you see on these guys that they think is cool to put on their bodies. A lot of that is inspired by, homages to Hitler and some pretty other awful things, which makes them fascinating characters for a crime thriller. Someone's thrown in here a couple of Eric Bana. I think I did get sent to Eric Bana. Maybe he's still interested, I don't know. But look, each time I release a book, there's interest from film and TV, and again, there's a bit of interest this time around. So we'll see. For me, my job is a writer, and I love writing books. And if someone sees there's a film or a TV in these books, then that'd be amazing. But for me, I just want to keep spending time with the character, John Bailey, and turning out these thrillers, which I've got plenty more ideas. So I'm excited to be given the privilege to do it. So I'll see if anyone got any final. We're almost getting to the end. It was scheduled for around half an hour. So any final questions from anyone? And really, thank you so much for jumping on here tonight. It's been great to connect with readers like this. Here we go. Leanne has got a question. Are you fearful for the future of democracy and a cohesive society in Australia? Well, look, I feel that these groups are a minority. I do worry about dog whistling politics, and I think that we've seen some of that here. I think that overseas, as I mentioned earlier, there are far-right nationalist leaders, running many countries. We've seen it's a really there's a bit of a worrying trend there, but I think that the pandemic has been a bit of a leveler for a lot of this stuff. I think it's brought people back to looking for facts and the truth. And yeah, sure, it does make people angry. At the same time, they may be anti-vaxxers, they may be those out protesting for their own reasons. But I do think, and I've seen this in the media for us at the ABC, we're drawing the biggest audiences we ever have on all of our platforms because, people are coming looking for the truth. And so for us, we really had a strategy to double down on factual journalism. And I think people have appreciated that. So in coming back to your question about far-right nationalism and sort of, I guess, fearful of a cohesive society in Australia, these people are the minority. And I think that I don't think that they would become the majority here. And, I love Australia, and I think too highly of the people here to think that would ever happen. How about one more from Kylie? She said, will you ever write a rural country thriller in the future? Look, Kylie, never say never. There might be enough Australian writers doing the rural thriller thing at the moment. I've really loved writing a thriller set in the big city or in cities. So that's been my focus at the moment, and that's my focus, I think, for a little while. But look, never say never. Bailey could head to the bush for a reason. But, I'm really enjoying Sydney as a character particularly, and making that a bit of an identity of the John Bailey books because, there are those that have done it. I'm keen to keep doing it, and I think that that's John Bailey's home, and there are so many good stories to tell in this city, and it really is a fascinating character in itself, the city. So yeah, I think Sydney for me for a while. But yeah, I think we're at the end of the session. So just thank you so much to the Better Reading community, you all, the reviews you write, the engagement you have in reading and sharing books with each other is fantastic. And as I said, I'm really privileged to be able to talk to you all. And I really hope that if you get around to reading The Enemy Within, for those that haven't, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you want to go back and check out the early books as well, and you'll learn a bit more about John Bailey and his demons and his endless pursuit of the truth. So thanks so much, everyone.